Hi, everyone. Welcome to Here for the Health of It. And we have an incredible show for you today. We have Natasha Hastings, who's a two-time Olympic gold medalist in track and field. She's also a licensed professional counselor, works with the USC athletes, and we get into all things performance, running, track and field, what her life is like now with her son. We talk about performance-enhancing drugs and much, much more. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Here for the Health of It podcast. I'm Dr. Randy here with Dr. Tom. As always, we are Columbia's hottest and fastest growing podcast, bringing you the best guests in Columbia. When we started this, we knew there was tons of cool people in Columbia, and we wanted to meet with them and interview them, and we figured that a podcast was the best way to do that. So here we are, 169 episodes in now. We have a great guest. We have Natasha Hastings, who is a two-time Olympic gold medalist in track and field.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Also a licensed professional counselor. You said that you work at the University of South Carolina, and then you also have a private practice as well. You're a mom, philanthropist, entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I was looking through your Instagram. You got a ton of followers, which we love. And you recently, I think you had a post about hanging up your cleats. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, right?
2 years.
2 years ago? Okay. But you're still involved in the Olympic world a little bit. So tell us what it was like going from top of the world, gold medalist. What does that look like for you? And then what was the transition into, all right, now I've accomplished it?
We are jumping right into the things. That is a very loaded question. So I officially retired just a little over 2 years ago. And it's definitely a thing that I think I prepared for, but even still in the process, it's still a process. It's still a transition 2 years later. I started running track when I was 9-10 years old. I knew that I wanted to be an Olympian after watching or during watching the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. And then, so I've been running my whole life, came here to the University of South Carolina and ran track here. And then somehow I didn't, even though I knew I wanted to go to the Olympics, I didn't imagine that I could make a living for it. And so I ended up retiring 2 years ago at the age of 36. So I was pro 2007, I would have been 21, 22. What most people don't know, and you probably don't know, when I came to South Carolina, I wanted to be a chiropractor.
No
Wow.
way.
Swear. And then, so I still had the plans to like go back to school to do it, but then somehow I just kept on running. And every
That's
year,
great.
like, we talk about two-time Olympic gold medalist, but there's so many world championships in between there that it just kept going and going and going.
Right.
And then I got pregnant with my son. Then COVID happened, and I was like, in a therapy session, and I was like, I think this is actually the thing that I want to do. So I actually enrolled in school while training for the 2020 Olympic trials after having my son, and then ended up back in Columbia because Coach Fry offered me a position to pay for my degree, which if it's free, is for me. So here I am back in Columbia. But, I always knew that there was more to me than my sport. And that was something that my mom instilled in me from very early on. I, in fact, say that I wasn't a good student until I started running track. I was able to kind of take my competitiveness into the classroom. But, I knew that someday the end would come. I didn't imagine it coming at 36, but I knew that it would come. So I was always kind of thinking about, okay, what's next? How do I prepare for it? And then now, in the shoes that I am now, I actually work in the athletic department at USC. So I'm a counselor to our student athletes. And I'm always talking to them about, who are you? You're more than your sport. When you come in here, we can talk about your sport, but if we never talk about your sport, great, right? What are your values beyond who you are on the field or the court or the track or whatever that might be? But even still, with all of that, it is challenging to make that transition, knowing that it could come at any point. I was blessed enough to be 36 when it did come, but you do lose a piece of who you are in a sense.
Right.
And so kind of like going through this rebirth of who I am. My son is 5, so I'm also kind of transitioning into being mom. It was like all of these things happening at once. So I'm still figuring it out, still learning, but I would say like the biggest piece was always knowing that I had to be more than just who I was on the track.
It's a long career.
Very long.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
And I think about the last time that I really sprinted hard, which was
On a beach
yeah,
on
which was
vacation.
February of this year. Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Columbia Family Chiropractic, with 3 easy-to-get-to locations, one in Forest Acres, which is by Trader Joe's, one in O'Neill Court by the DMV, and one in the Northeast by Sand Hills. You'll be sure to have somewhere near you. They offer a ton of services from corrective care, on-site digital x-rays, spinal decompression for bulging or herniated discs, dry needling for injuries, pediatric care, and a Class 4 laser. They accept all your major insurances. And if you mention this ad, you'll get a discount on your first appointment. Check out their website at cfc4health.com or Google Columbia Family Chiropractic. That's cfc4health.com. We have this one friend who he's always competing against you, but you don't know it. His name's Cameron. So he'll spend the entire 6 months leading up to a vacation with a sprinting coach. And then he'll spend the whole vacation trying to like plant seeds so that you think it's your idea to sprint against each other, and then he'll win. But I fell down so hard because my feet got going fast. Like my body went faster than my legs, and then I fell down on the beach. But I don't know. I'm a little scared to sprint really hard on a beach after that. So I would imagine I don't know if you've fallen down. I haven't seen any videos of you falling. But I would imagine you fall once or twice and you get a little nervous.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen. Actually, I do have a funny story about that, but I won't share. But even what
Someone tripped you?
No.
Is that what it was?
I fell
Someone
over
was
my
cheating?
own feet.
Oh.
It was actually my very first time wearing spikes, cleats.
Oh, yeah.
And, you have to pick your feet up. So
Right.
thankfully I won my race. The race was over, and then I just tripped because I didn't
You're
pick
stuck.
my feet up.
Yeah.
But it was like a loud, oh, when I fell, it was that. And I was like 9 or 10.
And
But
you can stomp someone's foot with those cleats bad,
Yeah.
too. You got to be careful.
yeah, I have a scar wound from being spiked. So yeah,
Damn,
Did they purposely do it?
I don't think
You
so.
think they might have. You don't want to admit
No.
it.
Maybe.
No, but no, I think, what you're describing, it actually happens to the most elite athletes, where there are times where your body is moving so fast that you kind of have to get used to having that speed or carrying that speed if you're not ready for it, or, you can injure yourself.
That's true. I mean, elite athletes like you and I,
Yeah.
real time. We have to deal with that all the time.
All the time. But you're laughing. But now even I find myself adjusting my workouts and, recognizing, okay, you're not,
Right.
5% body fat in the gym, training 5-6 hours a day anymore. Like, know your limits. So, even the elites, we got to know where those limits lie for us as well.
What is the peak age for running? I mean, when 36 sounds like, I feel like I stopped
Ancient.
running at 22.
Towards the end of my career, my teammates started calling me auntie.
Yeah.
It is a long career. The average is about 5 or 6 years for the track athletes.
That makes sense.
So to make it to the age of 30, to make it beyond the age of 30
Right.
is sort of, I don't want to say unheard of. There are a couple of athletes, actually a couple of my peers that are still competing or had just retired in the last year. But 36 is a long time, and especially for women, that can be considered a long career.
Yeah. And then what does the job look like during all of this? Like, just take me through like an average year, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not even an Olympic year, like a world championship year or something.
Yeah, every year was, I would say, even a non-Olympic year with a world championship year, or there would be 1 year in between the cycle where we would call it an off year. So every 4 years you have the Olympics, and then every 2 years is the world championships. But in between that 4-year cycle, there is what we call an off year, meaning there's just not a major outdoor championship. We would have an indoor world championship that year, but outdoor championship, we would kind of have a rest year, if you will. But we get 6 weeks out of the year that is your off time. For my training group, we would start training like mid-October, November 1, we would be back into training. My work day would look like I'd wake up at about 7 a.m. I'd be in the gym by 9 a.m. So
Just like crushing weights or
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 7 a.m. is breakfast, get the body awake,
Yeah.
right? Be in the gym by 9 a.m. We're lifting for about an hour and a half. And then I would leave the gym and head to practice, track practice, that is. I'd be there for about 2 hours. The practice would usually start at 11, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. And then a couple of days a week, we would have recovery. So that would be either massage, chiropractor visits, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So my work day, I would say, was like 9 to 2. But then I would always have to emphasize that, like, the rest of the day is also spent like recovering from what I just did or preparing
Right.
for the next day. So I would even joke that there were some days that, depending on what the workout was that day, I would be in bed by 5. And my
kidding.
friends are like, what? And I'm like, yeah, there were certain days that it's kind of embarrassing, but it is what it is, that I would come home from practice and I wouldn't even make it to the shower. Like, I would pass out on the couch for hours and then finally get up and, like, you know, get myself cleaned up and, you know, get ready for the next day. But it was literally a physically challenging, like, I used my body to do my job, right? So yeah, 9 to 2, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. And then, you know, depending on when your competition season starts, you kind of taper and alter that based on your competition schedule.
Gotcha. And then what about with sponsors and things of that nature? Like, are you having to go or were you having to go and do a lot of this stuff?
Yeah.
And what was that like? Like, people coming after you to want you to wear their clothes or wear their shoes or
Yeah. So I don't want to say it came up during an interesting time, but I do feel like it's worth mentioning. Like, my freshman year of college was the first year that Facebook came around.
Yeah.
And now, you know, especially now working with student athletes with the NIL situation, like, there has been an evolution of how all of that works, which I think is great because the amount of work that we put in every day, like, I think you should be getting paid and paid handsomely for the work that you do. I had a shoe sponsor for most of my whole career. Actually, I was with Under Armour. I would have like appearances. I would have to do campaigns, photo shoots, that sort of thing. So there is that added layer of, like, you have to perform,
Right.
number one, but then you're also a marketing piece for them. So whether it's, you know, how many posts you put out on social media, the story that you're telling, you know, and having to, you know, meet those contracted requirements, whether it be the number of competitions for the year or, you know, like I said, appearances or photo shoots, that sort of thing. And then, you know, you kind of have this exclusivity deal, if you will, with your shoe company, but then, you know, you can kind of branch out to other, you know, other sponsorship situation. And so I say that to say, when I was talking about the NILs, like, now there's more versatility in the types of deals that the athletes can have. But I also want to acknowledge, in my sport, not everyone is blessed enough to have that sponsorship. And I say that to say, like, going back to, I retired at the age of 36, that was largely by having a sponsor, because if I'm training from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., where do I have time to work a 9-to-5 job?
Right.
But there are actually athletes who are at the Olympics just this summer who do work 9-to-5s while training
Which
the
is
way that,
wild.
which is wild
Yeah.
to imagine, right? And so there are athletes who have to compete without this sponsorship, and then there's this expectation to perform at this level. Like, listen, being at the Olympics is the 1% of the 1%, right? And so to train at that level and then not have the sponsorship to cover that, like, you're paying your coaches, your massage therapists, your chiropractors, like, your team is now your financial responsibility. And without that sponsorship, it's really difficult to pay everybody that has to be paid in order for you to perform at the best of your abilities. So I like to be clear that I was blessed enough to have sponsorship, and that was largely why I was able to go as long as I did. But in track and field, it is challenging for athletes to have sponsorship in that way.
I used to be obsessed with Under Armour. 2008, 2009.
Probably because she was branding it.
I
It's right
wonder
in your
if
brain.
subconsciously you affected me. But I thought everything that they made was fit me perfect, lasted forever, looked good no matter how I washed it, how many times I washed it. But then something happened where I think they tried to market to everybody instead of just athletes. And then I would go and I would buy stuff that just didn't fit right. It wasn't made for an athlete. It was made for a non-athlete,
I
non-athletic
love how
body.
much he pretends he's an elite athlete.
No,
over
I
here.
am. No,
Like, his body type's an elite athlete.
You know what's funny is I've retired from hockey probably 4 times. Like when I was 18, I was like, I'm retiring. I'm just going to go to undergrad. That lasted like 6 months, got recruited to a junior team. I was like, all right, I'm going to just play juniors, then I'll retire. Then I went to chiro school, and then I was like, I'm just going to focus on chiropractic. Ended up choosing my school based on how good their hockey team was and played hockey throughout the entire time there. Then I was like, all right, I'm just going to focus on my practice. That lasted a year. Ended up joining like a senior men's team in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Got my teeth knocked out. I was like, all right, I'm done now. Retired for 5 years. And now I just picked it up again.
Oh, God.
I just can't stop.
Bless your soul.
Right? Do you feel like you're
No.
going to be back out there sprinting and running? You're going to be like, oh, that's it. The 40 and over category, you'll be able to just take on the world.
I've been asked that question about like doing masters, and I don't have that interest.
Is it 40? Is Masters 40 and over?
I think it's actually like 32, 33. Like I was even competing professionally, and I was the master's age. Yeah, I don't.
I said the same thing too, and I lasted
She's
progressively
back.
longer.
Yeah, but I can see it because since retiring, being consistent with training, there's this interesting for one, I'm not training the way that I trained for 20 something years. Like I had this crazy belief, which now I know to not be true, but a workout wasn't a good workout if I wasn't puking my brains out at the end of it. Like I was testing the limits every day.
Love that. That's an Olympic. That's how you become an Olympic gold medalist.
Not so healthy though.
But the people who aren't winning are the people who are like, you know what? I'm just gonna
They left a little in the
yeah,
tank.
you know what? I'll leave a little. It's only Monday. Maybe I'll do a little more tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about where I am now, being on the outside working with student athletes, where I'm like questioning, did I need to be that insane to be successful? Like, how healthy was that? Yeah, but it's interesting because when I was competing, I had that motivation and I would but now working out, it's like I'm not training to make an Olympic team. So the motivation is a little bit different. Now I want to stay healthy, but also I've got a rambunctious 5-year-old that when he runs away from me, I find myself digging into a gear like, wait a minute, I'm the Olympic champ here. Why am I having to struggle to catch you? But yeah, competitive, I get the question all the time. Like, number one, do I miss it? Number two, watching the Olympics this summer. No, I'm and it's not that I don't miss it. I think I was blessed, number one, to walk away from it at a time that I was ready to walk away from it. And I was clear on my why and my purpose moving forward. But the crazy level that I used to train to, and no, I'm good.
Love that.
So when did you know you had a screw loose, like this Olympic mindset type of thing? Like when you were 9 and you started running, did you have the fastest man, fastest woman competitions in grade school and started seeing I'm crushing?
That's exactly right. So yes, the typical gym class, the girls race against the girls, the boys, who's the fastest girl, who's the fastest boy, then the two champions race each other.
Yeah.
Yes, I beat the boy. But also both of my parents actually also ran track. My parents actually came to the States on athletic scholarships. And my mom was also an Olympian for Trinidad and Tobago. So it was just in the house. It was what I grew up around. My dad coached at their alma mater in New York, and I would go to practice with him. So I was just always around it. So when I get that question, I'm often like, I was kind of born into it. Like, it was just, my parents did it. I was around it all the time, that sort of thing. The screw loose thing, the awareness of it, I would say probably did not come until close to retirement, but I can reflect and say that there were things that I did that I now realize where, like
that was the difference.
Yeah. Like when I was in high school, I remember having a conversation with my coach where we had kind of started drifting away from the rest of the team, meaning I was doing like sort of my own workouts.
Right.
And I probably shouldn't say this. I hope we don't get in trouble for saying this, but there was a conversation of like, well, why is she getting different workouts? And my coach's response was, I could give you the workouts, but you're probably not going to finish them.
Right.
My friends were getting into things that I just didn't have interest in. Like, I was always very focused on like, this is what I want to do. This is what's going to get me a scholarship into college. And then when I got here, I'm also clear on like, I had my fun in college. Like, I was at the parties. I was in the honors college. I was an exercise science major while I was in school. So I was kind of I told my boyfriend, like, you think you met a jock, but I was a smart jock. But so I always kind of had that balance. But then even as I became a pro, like, I missed out on a lot of milestones for my family, my friends, weddings, like special occasions, because like I ended up moving to Austin, Texas for 10 years to train there.
Is that where it was? I was wondering that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'd been away from family, but I was also very intentional about picking the people that I worked with and trained with, meaning like being around people that had like-minded goals, or not even like similar goals, but your drive towards your goals was similar, right? Working with coaches that wanted to work with me, right? Like, when we show up to work every day, like, we're going to battle together. We're in this together, as opposed to you just show up because this is your job and this is what you do. Like, having that passion, that like passion with the person that I'm working with. But then I would have certain conversations with friends where, when you're in the 1% and you surround yourself with the 1%, you kind of don't have an awareness of like the audacity of what it is that you're trying to do. Like, the standard was just the standard, like, and the standard was excellence, right? The standard was making the Olympic team, right? And so when I started coming into contact with people that would say like, well, I just want to make it to the Olympic trials. And I had a teammate of mine, we kind of sat back and we were like, you just want to make it to the trials? Like, if I don't make the team, like, that's unacceptable. And like, your standard is just to make it to the trials. So again, it wasn't until like towards the end of my career that I started to have an understanding of like, okay, you're in a very small group of people that are crazy enough to dream and do what you do, right? That, for some friends that like, I actually had to distance myself because they were saying things that I think they thought were helpful, but if you there's no room for any sort of doubt, right? There's no room for, well, what if this doesn't work out? What if it doesn't work out? Then I put my shoes back on and I get up and try again. But so, it wasn't until like close to retirement age that I started to realize that I was like naturally protecting myself from sort of those distractions or, like I said, seeds of doubt. But then like who I chose to surround myself with and the circles that I worked in.
It's wild to think like your circle was so different. Like, that was the normal, but to everybody else, it's just
insane.
Yeah.
Screws loose.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned indoor versus outdoor. I always wondered the difference in that. Like, what would you rather, run an indoor meet, an outdoor meet, and what was the difference?
That's interesting. Like, would I rather?
Like, is one fast? Like, could you be faster on one?
So, scientifically speaking, outdoors is just faster. from the science of, the indoor track is shorter, so you have more turns to run, you have more laps to run. So, the 400 indoor is 2 laps as opposed to 1 lap outdoors. But that's not to say that there weren't anomalies where sometimes people would have, faster times indoor than outdoor. I think in track and field, the emphasis is always placed on the Olympics and the World Championships. So it's just, you get more respect for the outdoor season as opposed to the indoor season. There are differences in like the time of year the championships are, of course, and indoor exists because there's cold weather. So if we want to continue to have track and field, like it's going to be indoors. But I would say the emphasis is more on the outdoor, and you get more notches in your belt for being an outdoor champion than an indoor.
You kind of like snub someone. They're like, I'm the indoor champion. You're like, yeah,
no,
like
because I've got a few indoor medals myself.
Oh, no, those count.
It's just the nature of the game. So, yeah.
What does it feel like when you have the gold medal on? Do you walk around your house with it sometimes? Just take photos of yourself? Just
First thing you do in the morning,
Put 'em
is
all
slide it
on.
on
So,
like a robe.
first of all,
no robe, just a medal.
I, for a very long time, did not even have my medals.
Where were they?
I hope y'all caught the looks on their faces. So my mom was at every major championship with me, and it's interesting because when you're on the podium, when you hear the national anthem played in your honor, there is this unspeakable, like it's hard to put it into words, sense of pride, sense of honor, like, you did this thing. One of the things that I'm really passionate about now working with other athletes is like being present and being in the moment. So much of my career was, again, kind of snubbing someone. Most of my medals are relay medals. Again, when we talk about the respect that you get in the game, you get the respect for individual medals. And so for me, it was always kind of like, okay, got this medal, or I made this team. I've got another track meet to get to. Now I have to be focused on my world ranking at the end of the year, or, the better shape or better position that I finished this season is the better position I am for next season. Like I was always thinking about the next. And so I never really cherished those moments. So said my mom's at the World Championships with me, I would literally come off the podium, give her the medal, and then I was off to my next track meet because we still had meets after the World Championships. So I really only have my Olympic medals now, and I only have them because I had an event to go to and they asked me to bring them. Yeah. And so I just ended up not giving them back to my mom. Now with my son, this summer watching the Olympics, of course, he was obsessed with it, and he was like doing down starts and sprinting, and he would be like mimic. My son is autistic, so he says a lot of scripts. So having watched track and field, like he'll repeat the commentators how they're commentating the race. So he would always say Christian Coleman and Sha'Carri Richardson. And I was like, boy, do you know who your mom is? Like you're talking. So I would try to like show him some of my old races, and he was not interested. But he ended up coming across my medals because I had them out for another event. And that was like the first time that I would say that I kind of sat down and was like, wait, this is actually kind of cool. And like, this is really cool that I get to share it with my son and like show it to him. And like, we took pictures, and I don't know that he understands like, mommy went to the same thing and did a similar thing. But like, yeah. So I don't know. It's still kind of, I think I cherish them more now, but in the moment it was just kind of like, on to the next, which is sad. But
I don't know. I think in order to get there, that's kind of who you have to be.
Yeah.
Like most people that, at least in the chiropractic business world, they make a huge accomplishment, and then they just roll into the next thing.
Yeah.
Just it's about the journey more than the actual result, maybe.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I just wish that being present for more of it, because, my first Olympics was the 2008 games, and then I missed 2012, and then I went to 2016. And I can't really tell you much about the 2008 games. I was just laser focused. I was there to compete. I didn't do anything outside of track and field. And in 2016, when I went to Rio, I was like, no, like you have to like be present, make memories with your family, with your teammates, go out and see the city and all of that thing, all of those sort of things. So it was two very different experiences. And for me, about halfway through my career, it was actually my passport that gave me this wake up call. But I was like, I've been to so many different places. I've accomplished so many different things that my accomplishments have been minimized, but I also don't remember these experiences.
Yeah.
And what good is all of this if I don't even have the joy and the memories of these accomplishments? And so that's kind of what I mean when I'm like, be where your feet are, like take the moment to celebrate these moments. All of that work, again, another conversation with my teammates. It's like my race was 49 seconds. Now they're running 48, close to 47. But hours and hours and hours for that 49-second moment.
Yeah.
And it just goes by quickly. So, really trying to be more intentional about like you've put in the work. So celebrate the moments as they come as well.
Nice. So with the relay, how do they pick? I always wondered how they pick the team. And like, are you guys friends or like were some of these people rivals? Like, what was that like?
Great question. Because that is the probably most interesting part about the relay. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say particularly because I don't have any other experience to speak to their experience. But Team USA we call it the number one team in the world. It's the hardest team to make. It's kind of offensive to say this, but the facts are the facts. In some instances, it's harder to make the U.S. Olympic team than the Olympic Games itself.
Really?
Yeah. And just to give that an explanation, like for the women's 4x4, the men's 4x4, it doesn't matter who comes in top, whatever, right?
Right.
Like we have enough people that if you are the number one quarter miler in the world and you show up to the Olympic trials and you did not make it, we can still go to the Olympics and at least be on the podium.
Yeah.
And the example that I use is in 2016, again, the world record holder in the women's 100 hurdles. She did not make the Olympic team. And the world was in an uproar. Like, how do you not? She did not make the team. So she missed making the team. And then the very next week broke the world record. And so everyone was in an uproar. Like,
right.
How do you go to the Olympics and not send your world record holder?
Right.
Well, at the Olympics, the three women, not including the world record holder, swept the 100 hurdles. So we're that deep that,
Sure.
So to your question, the relay was quite an interesting thing because you spend all year competing against one another.
Yeah.
And you're competing for the 3 spots to compete in the World Championships, right? And then you get to the World Championships, you get to the Olympics, and now we got to be teammates and smile for the camera and have the chemistry to get the baton around the track. And, it's challenging.
Yeah. Yes. That's what I was wondering is most of your training would be just you running a 400 and then probably as it gets closer to the competition, you work on the handoff part of it?
Yeah. So that's the other crux of Team USA, right? Like, we all train in different parts. So like I'm in Texas, someone could be in Florida,
Right.
New York, California. Like we don't have time all throughout the year to be practicing handoffs. So it's literally like a relay camp or 2 throughout the year, which even that, like it's an invitation.
Right.
But again, we don't know that you're going to be on the team until we go to the trials and have the trials and see who makes it based on their finishings. And then, we have another relay camp right before we get to the World Championships or the Olympics, and that's where the handoffs are practiced. So
has that been that's been our big thing in the what is it, the men's
4x1?
Yes. That's the one I always think about is like we're so good, but we suck at the handoff.
Yeah.
And it's cost us.
Yeah. I try to be delicate about that because now I'm not there. So I don't want to speak on what I'm not there. So I don't know the facts. But the truth is, you've got these super talented athletes who have different coaches. And then now they come into an atmosphere where there's an entirely new coach that like you now have to listen to and, you know, get these personalities to work together. And naturally we're all elite athletes. We all have a little bit of ego. We all feel like, you know, we're the best at what it is that we do and want to have that position or spot. So you have to, it's truly an art, honestly, where, you know, you really only have a little bit of a window of time to get it all right, but you have all of these variables at play.
The coaches. So you guys have all your unique coaches. When it comes to Olympics or World Championship, is there then one main coach? Or like, how does that work? I never thought about that in track.
Yeah. So there are coaches, there are event coaches that are like on staff, and they're there, you know, to let you know like what your call time is, what time you need to be at the track, what time practices are available, those sort of things. If you are unable to have your coach, your personal coach there with you, they then step in. But then they also step in a way where it's like, well, this is what my coach wants me to work on. This is what my coach wants me to do.
Gotcha.
And again, going back to everyone's blessedness or level of whatever you want to call it, not every athlete is able to have their personal coaches there because, again, going back to who's paying for all of this, it's the athlete that, you know, you have to pay for your coach or your massage therapist or whatever it is that you're used to having at regular competitions also there on the road with you. So those coaches exist, but they're more, I don't want to call them lame duck coaches because they do make some decisions and that sort of thing. But, you know, your personal coach is still very largely involved and important in the process.
And would they ever have people doing 500 meters instead of 400? Like, I think sometimes as a coach, if you could get someone to be really fast all out for 500 meters, 400 meters seems easy.
Yeah, so not 500, but I'll use the 4x1 as an example where, you know, for any relay, the object is to keep the stick moving as fast as possible. So, you know, you have instances where you have 4 incredibly fast people, might be the 4 fastest people in the world, right? But if they don't have the chemistry to get that stick around the track and keep it moving as fast as possible throughout the zones, that really doesn't matter. And so I reference zones. There are particular places on the track that the stick has to be passed in that zone. And if it's passed outside, then it doesn't work. So in those instances, right, in the 4x1, you may have someone that you'll try to manipulate the zone a little bit where you're like, okay, if this person runs 110 meters, I know that the stick is going to continue moving fast. But this person, when they get to about 80 meters, they start decelerating. So that means the stick slows down. So we need to extend this zone a little bit more to make sure that we can keep that stick moving as fast as possible. So that's, again, where the art and the risk comes into play because, again, you have to make sure that exchange happens in that zone. But that's like where you have that wiggle room to play with just how far an athlete runs. But it's also based on we got to keep the stick moving as fast as possible at all times.
That was always the most frustrating part. I used to do it back in the day in like eighth, ninth grade. But you would always, as you're running, the person in front of you doesn't start fast enough.
Right.
So all of a sudden
Run
you're
past them.
slamming into them and you're like, get going,
slow
pushing
the baton
them.
down. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sometimes you just have to yell at them from behind, like, get running faster. And hope that they listen, I
Hope
guess.
that they listen or hope
start
that they can
earlier.
respond. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I got a weird question.
Uh-oh.
So, well, I brought this up for Molly Benetti was on the show who oversees some of the women's basketball stuff. Hair and necklaces. Like when I watch these, and especially sprinters running, and the hair is so long and the necklaces are like banging up and down, I have to think that takes or like adds seconds to or milliseconds. Like I see you have short hair in the photo we have up here. Mm-hmm. Is
There's
that
a
ever
story behind that?
is that ever talked about or thought about on like in swimming they shave their head and I'm like that makes sense. Now there's water.
Do they or do they wear swim caps?
They wear swim caps.
Yeah.
But like I'd be cool if you guys wore swim caps. I think you would go faster.
Yeah. So again, science is science, so there's no disputing science. Definitely a topic of conversation always. I did not always look like this. I was the girl who, I had the long eyelashes, the full face of makeup. Sometimes I did have in long
Yep.
extensions. And there would be, maybe you could shave off a few milliseconds or whatever. I never really felt that it made a difference.
Really?
I think there's a couple of things that I rely on, and I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, I felt like if I look good, I feel good. And if I feel good, I perform well. Also, I'm on television. Look at this picture that you are now using of me as I sit here, right? So even being presentable for my job, I'm on camera. I am, as well as performing, I'm entertainment. So there were a number of different things that went into the decision for myself, but I also say that it's really up to you. If makeup or whatever is not your thing, if that's not, then do what makes you feel good to perform the way that you want to perform. But, again, science is science, and there probably is some science that
I wondered if they ever
says-
tested that, That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm curious about performance enhancing drugs.
Uh-oh.
I
Yeah.
knew he'd get into that.
I have to. I'm obsessed with it because you have to go in there knowing there's other people doing it.
Unfortunately.
And you're going to say to yourself, well, I'm not going to do it. But also, I don't want to lose to someone who is doing it.
Yeah.
Walk me through what that was like the first time you heard of it, knew about it, and then what was the culture and how has that changed?
Yeah. I don't know that I can go through the first time I heard about it, because as long as I've been exposed to track, I know that that's a thing that exists.
Yeah. Like not at 9 or 10, or were your parents like kind of around enough
Giving you that
people?
Yeah.
deer antler.
Here, hey, give me some of that 9-year-old blood. I'm gonna put some more oxygen in it.
Well, no, I think just the conversations about it, right? And like hearing, certain people testing positive, or, even the speculation that, certain athletes were on performance enhancing drugs. I was educated in a way that, you could do those things and then end up with health issues later on, because like, the thing that I learned is that, it's not going to make you better by just doing it, right? But it allows you to do more work.
Right.
So you can do more work, which then means what? You're putting more stress on your heart. You're putting more stress on the rest of your body. So for me, is that worth it? And again, blessed enough to be sponsored for my whole career, but I wasn't out here making millions of dollars. It just was not that worth it to me, as well as, again, knowing who I was outside of the sport. To the question about like lining up against it, I can say that I don't want to say which track meet because it'll give it away, but there was an experience very early on when I turned pro that I kind of sat back and I asked myself, is this what I want to do, knowing that this is what I'm up against, right? And I ultimately had to make the decision that, I believe in what's done in the dark comes to light, right? Whether it's tomorrow or 20 years from now, when anyone's not looking, am I going to be proud of what it is that I'm doing, right? Like I said, not being willing to take my own risk for my health, for me, and then just trusting the work that I put in every day. And again, those screws loose where I was willing to go out and train to a, insane point or limit, if you will. But I was also personally affected by, someone doing performance enhancing drugs, where I mentioned I missed the 2012 games. There was someone who tested positive ahead of me, and I missed the 2012 games by one spot, and it was a relay spot, but it was one spot. And just about a week or so before going to what would have been going to the Olympics, we found out that this person tested positive. So then they asked, well, would you be willing to join the team? But what ended up happening, you have a certain time to declare who your team is. And once you pass that time, you can't add anyone to your roster. So I wasn't able to go. But it was kind of like, wow, like this is now the personal experience of someone doing this thing, being dishonest. And, it was someone who there were instances where like you lose out on prize money, you lose out on
Right.
sponsorship money. I can't go back and get those things. You know, now you hear conversations about like, well, you could sue that person, whatever. Is it really worth it? Am I going to get anything out of that? But yeah, it's a thing that unfortunately we know exists. I am actually quite passionate about it, and passionate about it in the sense of like, you know, in our sport, we have drug testing rules that, you know, not everyone is on board with. The system itself is not perfect and it's flawed. But I do think that it's necessary to at least promote clean sport. So,
Yeah. And I'm sure that as a counselor, you see some of the struggling upcoming athletes too, who now there is millions of dollars on the line.
yeah.
If you're a university student and you're the best of the best, it could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars.
Yeah. I have to speak honestly to that. I have not seen that yet,
Wow.
but I don't think that you are wrong. I think the temptation certainly exists, where, you know, things are happening in the NCAA as a whole with like roster limits on teams where they're not even going to be allowed to walk on teams anymore at some point. Yeah. So the opportunities are now limited. And then now to your point about like, you have some teams where you've got somebody making millions of dollars and someone else is begging for a few $1,000s for, you know, a smaller NIL. So the temptation, I'm sure, is there to do this sort of thing. Yeah.
What is the prize money for a gold medal? Do you guys get anything for that? Like, do you get paid?
So the Olympic Committee does not pay you.
Really?
When I was competing, I believe it has changed a little bit, but the USOPC would pay us $25,000, I think it is, for a
Like
gold
per
medal.
gold medal.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. And then, you know, whatever your contract is, you write whatever clauses in where your sponsor might pay you a bonus for whatever medals, world records, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, nice. All right, I want to talk about the athlete village at the Olympics.
God.
I hear, I always hear that it's a very incestual, sexual, just mixture of athletes. What's your experience?
My experience is I had no experience of that.
Did you see any of that? Did you see that it was happening?
Yeah, I mean,
Like, are you mingling with other countries and stuff too?
yes,
Like,
we all live together. Well, let me give that a little bit more context. Like Team USA, we're such a large team that we do end up having our own building within the village. But for the most part, we're all living in the village together. So we are all mingling together. We are all, you know, whatever. We travel the world together for other track meets. So like we're familiar with one another, or you might, you know, follow other sports and, you know, that sort of thing. I just want to like say that it's not like people are sitting in the cafeteria getting it on. It's not that kind of thing, right? But I also like to emphasize, you think about, number one, training for a moment for your entire life, and that moment finally coming to pass, right? Like, it's exciting. It's all of the things. It's also very stressful, right? And then now you put the most physically fit, beautiful, attractive people all in one place. Like,
what are you gonna do? It's like Love Island.
So
that's true. Did you ever have a crush from a different country or someone that you just had your eyes on? You watch them on TV and you're like, oh, I'm gonna try to get right across from them in the cafeteria.
No.
Did you ever meet Usain Bolt?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. We're the same age, so we actually were at like a lot of junior things, to junior championships, world championships, and stuff like that together.
No chemistry though. No. Did he try to be like?
It's interesting because how do I explain this? I'm a girly girl, but somehow I ended up also being one of the guys. Like I would be in situations where I'd have to remind them, like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm still a girl. Don't need to hear this locker room talk." So no, not anything like that. I'm really trying to think if there was anyone that I had a crush on, or no. I don't know.
How about any rivals or nemesis?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Anybody you like put on your bulletin board and like when you were working out and just thought, this is who I'm going after?
No. I mean, I was always aware. You're aware of your competitors, right?
Yeah.
But I also had like this, pardon me, like also like a any given Sunday kind of attitude, right? Where like, yeah, you have your Sonia Richards-Ross, your Allison Felix, your Dee Dee Trotters that like, you know that they are going to show up on their A game. But I also never put it past anyone else that was in the race either, because I would be
Right.
considered like, it could be my day,
Yeah.
So I never really, I can't say that there was like one person that I like had the bullseye on or,
Yeah. All right.
So you've been out of this sport for 2 years, but you're still kind of in it. But I know there was, especially like 2020, 2018, there was just these massive arguments around the Olympics about what gender you were born versus what gender you're competing in. Did you ever have to get questions about that, go through that? What was your experience?
I can't say that I specifically had questions or experience to the extent of, I was around when I feel awkward saying her name, but it's been a conversation. But it's who she is, Caster Semenya, right? And for me, I remember her coming on the scene in 2009, and it was at the World Championships, and a lot of people just had comments. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, number one, gender roles are something that we are taught. It's not something that like you're just, so because you express yourself in a certain way doesn't make you a certain way or thing or, and number two, I also felt like at the end of the day, this is a human being and someone's child. And I don't, the way that she was being treated, the things that were being said about her, I didn't feel like were fair. I also felt like whoever is on the board of committees that makes that decision, I don't want to be one of those people.
For sure,
it's a tough decision.
Right.
It is. And it's one that, again, now being a counselor and being an advocate for people, being an advocate for trans people, like, I don't know what the answer is. And I don't pretend to have the answers and know the answers. I think, hopefully we can get to a place where it's equitable for all. But I don't know the answer. I don't. And I'm not going to pretend that I do. And I just think it's a really, really difficult decision. And I think either way that it goes, you're going to have people that aren't happy about it, people that are upset about it. But at the end of the day, I hope that we can remember that no matter what side you sit on, they're human beings. And we should treat everyone as such, with dignity, with respect, and all the things. So it's a tough question. I don't know the answer. For me, what's important to me is that everyone is a human being and should be treated as such and with respect.
Nice.
That's good.
Is there any new technology out there that's getting people faster? like I was thinking, I think I saw a treadmill where they like hover you over top of it a little, like grab your waist maybe, and then they make your legs go as like faster. Have you seen that? Like where you're running, but you're kind of floating to try to get the speed of, say, I don't know, 23 miles an hour.
So I think
23.
my brain
is that a number on the
blanking
treadmill?
I don't know.
Holy cow.
Well, for some of these kids.
Yeah.
My brain is blanking on the name of, I know what you're talking about, but it's sort of like getting your turnover to be as fast as possible, but also minimizing the impact of running
and
that
like
way.
getting used to that, like where you've never felt that speed, and it's just showing you.
Because if you're not ready for that speed, you can topple over on your face.
Like Randy.
I've been there, and it's not fun.
You felt it.
So the way that makes sense to me, the waist holds you from falling. So even if you do fall, you don't land on your face.
Exactly.
No, yeah. It's like almost like a sleeve that you like hover over top of it, and your legs are just underneath this.
Yeah.
Rolling.
It's like those things in bowling where they like there's no gutter.
The bumper.
The bumpers.
But have you seen, like, has there been an evolution from age 21 to 36? Like, like always, when I think of track and field, I think of like you run.
Yeah, but I think it's the shoes.
Shoes?
But I think,
Okay.
I'm going to talk about the shoes, but I have to talk about the evolution of the sport in general. And we see it in all sports with innovation and, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I wasn't around then, but the tracks were grass, right? And then Chevron and Mondo and different surfaces came about. And then spikes came about, right? Cleats, whatever your terminology is for it. And naturally, we see people start to go faster. And in the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, there has been new technology that has come about with the shoes that we're now seeing faster times, particularly in the sprints. The long sprints and the longer distances. Like the marathon, where the marathon was the introduction of the shoe, and we saw the world record go down, and then there was this whole thing where the technology was banned for a while, and then now I think my educated guess, I want to be clear on it being a guess, that the technology was made available to everyone. So now everyone has it, so it's an even playing field, and we're seeing people run faster. But I think that is also, again, going back to the evolution of different surfaces, different shoes. We're also seeing changes in sports science, knowing how to coach and train for peaking and tapering and that sort of thing. So I think there's a number of things that go into the evolution of people running faster.
Gotcha.
But yeah, technology is a part of it.
And I imagine they're using a lot of like the Whoop, like Aura rings and things where you're getting more data on how the body's recovering and sleep and all that stuff.
Which interestingly enough, I feel like that stuff kind of can also work against you.
Where you like don't work out as hard because you're like, I'm a little.
Not that you don't work out as much, but you all kind of become obsessed with it.
Right.
To where it's meant to help you track these things and be better at it. But if you're stressing about it, is it actually helpful to have this information? Or, so I think, too much of any good thing is never a good thing, so like knowing how to use those things and when it's starting to become, overkill, I think that's just as important as well. So
what do you think I should run a 40-yard, or not a 40, a 400-meter, a 40-year-old male, if I'm just trying to like gather metrics for myself? What do you think I should run it in?
I don't know. I'm not.
Like, what's acceptable? Like a minute 10?
Maybe. I guess. Like.
Or is that too long?
Yeah, 70 seconds.
Does that feel like a good average?
That might be good.
Like if I'm like, all right, I'm 40, this is the right range.
To like go out there today, haven't trained, like 70,
but then if I go out there and I'm like, oh my God, it was a minute and a half, then I know, I got to get it down to a minute 5 or minute 10.
Yeah. It's a marker. This is what we say about time trials, right? Come out on the first day of practice and just do a thing. Like, listen, this is a marker. This just tells us where we start.
Yep.
And then we can go in and put the work in and make some adjustments, and we'll have another one and see where we are, and we'll just continue to work from there.
All right.
It's the 400 meter is so hard. In my experience, like the 100 meter, you don't really have time to get tired. It's more just like how fast can you move your legs. You do get tired, but it's a different type of tired than you hit 300 meters and you're like, oh man, I got 100 more meters to go, and I got nothing left.
Yeah.
I was going to say you hit 110 meters and you go, I got nothing left.
Yeah.
Oh, I just remember that.
Well, the 400 is the race that is mostly anaerobic, but then starts to tap into the aerobic.
That was my experience too. Yep.
Yeah. That as I say this, and I know people are going to come for my neck, but whatever, because I do think that they run the 800 almost like a sprint now. But I would even venture to say, and I've had some 800 meter runners even say that the 400 is harder than the 800 because of that mix of anaerobic, aerobic, strength, speed. Like you can't go full out, but you kind of got to get close to it, and then you still got to be able to finish that last 100. Like. Yeah, it is. The joke is it's the grown woman, grown man race. Yeah. It puts some hair on your chest.
Yeah. Did you like straightaways or the rounded? What's it called? Round curve.
Curve or turn.
What'd you like better?
I can't say that I had a.
I feel like on the curve, you can kind of. Do you lean a little bit?
Yeah.
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 And is it slanted? Is the track slanted or no?
Indoors would be
Indoors?
bent. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you always curve the same direction,
Yes.
right? Is there ever a scenario like
You
in
always turn
Australia where
left.
you would run the opposite way?
No, you always turn left. Always turn left.
The difference too in where you start, far inside, way back, or on the outside, but you're way up. What's your preference there?
The preference would be to be in the middle. What I would end up learning was my best races came from me being on the outside, where I didn't see anyone and I had to focus on my race plan.
Yeah.
Right.
And everyone's different. And again, you might have a preference, but then start to figure out, but your best actually comes from being out or being down lower or being in the middle, whatever.
The middle always seemed terrible to me because I had one person on one side and one on the other side just flailing their arms and they'd swing their legs, getting
What, when you were in
cleated.
8th grade?
Yeah.
Shots fired.
Yeah, it was a big deal. What would I have been in 8th grade? 13, 14?
And he had puberty early, so he was
Yes.
dominating.
I was 5'9" when I was like
you were one of
11.
He was the guy.
So I was setting like high jump records, long jump records, 100-meter. I would go to these places and people would be like, "Oh, this is," and then of course like
Everybody
10th
caught
grade,
up.
everybody surpassed me by a million miles. But there was that time when people were talking to me about it, and I didn't really know any different. But I always like the inside, trying to catch up, like
Yeah.
that feeling like you're behind
Chasing,
and everyone's
yeah.
ahead of you. I just
Yeah.
that's just motivating for me.
I preferred that. Okay, being a part of Team USA, this almost never happened. But like being on a relay, I almost always preferred to like be behind when I get the baton, as opposed to like being out in the front, because you're blind essentially in the front.
Yep.
But yeah, being able to kind of play catch up was more fun to me.
Yeah, and passing someone just feels so good too.
It does.
You just see them start to struggle a little bit, and you're like, "Oh, here we go. I'm
does.
feeling good."
Yeah. I was a sprinter my whole life. And so I finally had this awakening of like, why are you doing something that like, this is not fun. This is not, you are not a distance runner. And I think, the natural thing to go to is like to do these mileage runs But recently I've just like taken some of my old workouts, and obviously it's just modified where like I'm not like timing myself. But I'll run like some 400s, 500s. But I'll just like time the rest to make sure that like I keep a short rest, keep my heart rate going kind of thing. But I'm not like running for just 20 minutes of just 1, 2,
Right.
3, 4,
I don't know how
1,
people
2.
do
I
that.
don't know how. The marathon is not on my bucket list.
Nightmare. Now, did you ever measure your quad in your peak?
I'm sure I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
No.
Dang. All right.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that's
you-
sort of one of those things where I talk about like the information is good, and I would get the information and I would kind of like hand it over to my coach. We'd have a conversation about it, but then like, it wasn't something that I would hold on to. Or,
Like your shoulders are shredded in 2016.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Everything's shredded. So did you say you were 5% body fat?
I was exaggerating, but I was like 11,
That's still
10,
insane.
11%. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you work on your shoulders to look like that, or was there an advantage
just
to
comes with
having
it.
strong
I
shoulders?
inherited those shoulders from my mom. The training, I can't say that like, especially my upper body, like we didn't really lift a lot of upper body. Some of it was just naturally just how we trained, or I would say genetics. Like the strength coach that I had, it was important. Like being at a university, most times your strength coach is probably like the football strength coach, right? And there's this notion that, well, it's muscle, so, it's fine. And it's like, no, like I still have to carry that for 400 meters. So there's this art of like being strong, being ripped. But also I had this joke where like I could just look at the weights and I would put on muscle mass. So I had to be very strategic of like who I worked with in the weight room, of like understanding like I'm building strength, not mass.
You don't want to get too big, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something that like I like to be shredded. I like to be cut. And when it would start like in like May or June, I would start to see my veins popping and I'm like, ooh, we're getting into good shape.
Yeah.
I was neurotic like that. See, again, the loose screws thing. But I can't say that like we worked specifically to have those shoulders. It just genetics.
I got to know why you wanted to become a chiropractor and why are we not getting you in school? Take us through that.
I saw a chiropractor through my entire career.
That's
awesome. I think I started seeing my chiropractor in New York probably at like 13, all through high school. And every time I went into his office, we would talk. You have the muscle charts up, and like I would be asking about the muscles and the bones, and if I ever had an injury, we would like talk in depth about that injury. And then, being in school, I was like, well, I'm an athlete. I want to know how these things work. And
Right.
In hindsight, or even at the moment, I knew that for me, I felt like it was also kind of a protective factor because I was aware of certain things, like i.e., it's not normal for you to not see your period. Like,
Right.
that there's signs that, your body fat is too low, but that information came from being interested in those things.
Right.
So I had the interest, and then there was the unfortunate Marcus Lattimore injury that I got sick to my stomach seeing. And then there were a couple of other like injuries
Where you were like,
I was
can't
like,
deal with that.
my stomach can't handle that. I
deal
don't
with
think that is what I want to do. I did consider going back to chiro school in 2012.
Yeah.
And I'd started working on my resume and all the things, and then just didn't happen. And now here I am.
Just kept making
Yeah,
the
just
next
kept
team
running.
every time.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of value in the chiropractic and sports space. Most professional teams now do have a chiropractor on staff. But
One
the
was
idea
on
of
my staff.
was
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the idea of your hips being imbalanced and then running a lot
Yeah.
on imbalanced hips or knees or ankles or
Yeah.
spine, shoulders, neck. It seems crazy, but a lot of people still don't know about it.
They still have no clue. And the thing that I often talk about too is like, it's not just when you get an injury,
Right.
like it's maintenance. Like I saw my chiropractor weekly, sometimes twice a week. And it wasn't that anything was wrong. It was about being balanced and like me having the awareness of like, my left hip feels a little bit high today. And then going into my doctor and he's like, yeah, it is actually, or, working on my Dr. John Ball, like he would work on specific things where he'd see in my race, like, oh, I see that you're not leaning into the
Right.
curve or turning into the curve. Let's work on your shoulder and hip angles and getting that aligned.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I had a chiropractor throughout my entire career, and I was nerdy of like, even with like my coach, like, why are we doing this thing? How does it work this way? What is, that stuff really interested me.
Yeah, you were an early adopter then of it, I think, right? Or
Yeah.
were all your teammates all getting adjusted every week?
Yeah.
Was that pretty normal?
Yeah. And that's in the 90s. Yeah.
See, I grew up my whole life going to a chiropractor. It was perfectly normal for us.
Yeah.
But then as I got older, I realized lots of people don't know it. They
know
don't
or-
understand it. Or they think,
Only
when
elite
I'm
athletes.
injured, or they think it's for rich people, or they think, I just go when I'm injured or pain or whatever. But they don't realize you get adjusted once or twice a week. You might have a career up until you're 36 years
36.
old.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yep. Exactly.
And then the last couple here was when you're counseling athletes now, what's the biggest issue that you are running into? Like, what are you working on them with? What are the topics that they're...
So I've been asked that before. And, we treat everything from anxiety, ADHD, depression. I mean, you name it, like bipolar disorder, like whatever.
Everything, yeah.
But I can't say that there is a specific thing that like everyone comes in for this thing. But I think more than anything, they just need someone to talk to.
Right.
My own experience and something that I often share is that professional athletes, collegiate athletes, especially now in the world of social media, like there is this expectation that again, they're not humans and people can just say and whatever they want to from behind their keyboards, or even again, our family, our loved ones say things that they think are helpful. But when you are living up to a certain standard or expectation, it's challenging. And there's this expectation that you are superhuman and you don't have feelings, or you're just mentally resilient and should be able to push through anything. And it's like, it's really just a safe space for them to come in and not feel like they have to live up to that expectation or any sort of judgment, and just let out whatever needs to be let out. And, you know, I have some students where, you know, we're treating a specific thing, or I should say we are always treating a specific thing, but sometimes they come in and it's just like, man, this week was rough, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I don't see them for a couple weeks, or, you know, we might check in like, hey, you good? Like, yeah, all is good. Like, I just needed to let that steam off. But it's really about allowing them that safe space of like, you are more than your sport.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched on the anxiousness, but when I look back to 2010, 2011, I don't remember seeing as many people who are extremely anxious as what I feel like now in the 20 to 22-year-old range feels.
Yeah.
Like there's always this fear of, I don't exactly know what the fear is that they have, but
I think there is more language and awareness around it. Not that there's more of it. I think we now have more language and awareness of it. So throughout my career, I suffered from performance anxiety. I didn't know I had performance anxiety. And then now as an adult, a retired adult from, I still don't believe that I'm an adult, but anyway, where just recently I had a conversation with my mom about like something that I was anxious about and I was going through, and it was regarding my son. And we got off the phone and she came back around and she was like, you know, we were talking yesterday and you were expressing like what this is that you're feeling and the anxiousness that you have. And she was like, it made me think back to when you were competing and you were so nervous. I mean, there were sometimes I was so nervous that I would vomit before a race, right? And she was like, I just can't imagine what you were actually going through while you were competing, and we just didn't know.
Right.
She was like, it was anxiety, right? And so I don't think that this thing is now more of a issue in terms of like seeing more anxiety. I think we are now more aware that this is what we're experiencing, and we now are more aware of the language to share what we're experiencing to then address it.
Yep.
do you think it helped? Do you think if you would have had more awareness, it would have helped you or hindered you?
I think helped, and I think that's a great question because it is your attitude towards it, right? Like my first experience with my sports psychologist, shout out to Dr. Friedman. I think he has a lot to do with why I now do the thing that I do. Our very first session, he said to me, when you're standing on the line, what are you saying to yourself? And it was every negative thought that you could think of. Like, this is going to be 50 seconds of pain. This last 100 is going to be painful. I don't want to be here. I can't wait till this is over. Wow. And this is before telehealth, but we were on the phone and the phone line went silent. And he said to me, Natasha, you've lost the race before it even began. But if I didn't have that conversation, I didn't know that those thoughts, those things that I was saying to myself were not helpful.
Right.
That was my coping mechanism to get through that experience, right? Like, because I knew it was going to be painful, or I felt like I didn't belong there. But once I was given that awareness, and then Dr. Friedman was able to work with me to help me change my language, change the way that I was looking at the experience that I was having, that's when I saw the change in my performance. And thereafter, my life, I would say as well. But if I didn't have that awareness, and if I didn't have the openness to receive Dr. Friedman and what it was that he was working with me on, then it wouldn't have made the difference. So I think, it's the awareness, but it's the attitude towards making that change as well.
Yep. That's good. And how do people find you if they want to work with you in private practice? Or is that even an option?
It is. So I have a profile on Psychology Today. Just search Natasha Hastings. I need to do a better job of all the things, but it's just, I'm juggling so many things. But yeah, you can find me on Psychology Today. I'm pretty active on Instagram as well. I try to get back to people, and my name, I keep it very simple. Just search Natasha Hastings on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just Natasha Hastings. I was around early enough that I could get
you got your real name.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's been a great show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. This was awesome. It
was
wasn't
fun.
your typical, what's it like being an Olympian? Thank you.
It's great.
Here
We're here for the health of it.
for the health of it.